Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from Brooklyn, along with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin, as always, coming to you for the West Coast. Hello.
Hail and well met.
Today, we're talking about episodes 4 and 5 of Dead City, and unfortunately, not a lot of news items out there, but that's not shocking given the strikes that are still going on. And I think that that's going to impact a lot of stuff in the next few months. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I think it's going to be a little bit like it was during COVID, where there was sort of like this stretch where there wasn't a ton coming out and then suddenly a massive amount of stuff coming out. So,
Yeah.
but right now, I mean, and I don't blame them, but this is going to be, it's going to be a long haul for them. So, we'll have to see how things unravel. So
Yeah.
um
And one thing that I just thought of, AJ, when a few months, weeks ago, when we were just entering, I think, our slow period for the summer,
Mhm.
the Emmys were happening, right?
Yep.
Wasn't that around that time?
Yeah.
And there were a handful of articles. I want to say AV Club and some others that I found to be like, legit, who were like, Interview with the Vampire needs to get a freaking Emmy. That show was
Yeah.
great. And then after it didn't win any, I think is how it kind of broke down. They were like, that was a goddamn travesty. That was a great show. So I was just, remembering those articles and how I thought it was cool that at least critics and people who, watch a lot of TV and write about it, we're really pushing for a show that you and I both enjoyed, and we have another season coming out not
Yeah.
too long to go. I just, you know, just mentioning that
Well, and I also, and then we did see that The Last of Us and a lot of the actors in The Last of Us got nominated for things that honestly I don't think a few years ago would have happened.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that people have some appreciation for the fact that, things, these things that people are putting together isn't just about like horror. There is a lot to it. And I think that traditionally anything that had this kind of like either sci-fi or horror or whatever it was would have this kind of stigma attached to it, that it wasn't necessarily high drama or it wasn't worthy of some of these types of honorifics and things like that. But I think that that's changing, definitely. And so I agree, though. I definitely think that Interview with the Vampire should have been nominated, and maybe we'll see a change this coming season. Not just for the acting, but I also thought that just as a piece of art, the whole thing was really done very well. So we'll see. And then, of course, our dearth of news, I think, is going to, this is always the case this time of the year anyway, but we'll start to see a ramp up around Halloween and things
Yeah,
like that. So
hopefully, right? I mean,
we will. You've little faith.
just for
Um,
like non-union projects, I mean, or stuff that was already in the bag.
well, the interesting thing is, so a friend of mine who does he does independent horror films and things like that. Apparently, you can um, appeal to SAG and
Yeah.
basically say, "Hey, my movie is not under these big umbrellas. It's this budget. This is where the funding's coming from," and they're apparently allowing some types of like
Oh, A24 was
special.
was the one that was let through because they met basically all the union's requests, and it was like, sure, we'll do that. We'll do all those things. And
Right. So
so
it's
they,
that,
they were
it's
given
that,
a
but
green
it's
light.
also the smaller independent productions, I think, are getting special dispensation during this time period. So
Yeah.
they are being allowed to go forward with some of their stuff. However, I think that the appeals process there's a lot of people lined up for it. And they are doing a lot of very intense vetting because basically what they don't want is some of these quote unquote independent productions actually being, independent productions under the guise of the bigger shops. So,
Mhm.
but anyway, I kind of like the fact that SAG's allowing that. I think that's awesome. And so hopefully that means there will be some stuff and maybe it's some really interesting things that may not have gotten um, quite the stage, the center stage that maybe they will get because there will be a dearth of other productions happening.
Yeah.
So if these projects are coming out when there is somewhat of a um, I don't know, a film slash series desert, maybe they'll get some recognition. So that's kind of cool idea. So we'll see. But anyway, do you want to talk about Oh, also, by the way, yet another article came out about 28 years later, but it was not
Hmm.
any more information than we had already seen. This one was a little bit more, oh, they're definitely doing it, and it was just exactly regurgitating what we had seen before, just in terms of the interviews. So I kind of like whoever keeps sort of putting that out there because I think that they're trying to convince Danny Boyle and everybody else that this is a good idea. So we'll see how that goes. But
That's funny.
I kind of love it. So keep it coming, whoever's like really pushing for this. So 28 years later, we'll see. But anyway, ready to talk about these two episodes?
Let's do it. Everybody wins a prize is episode 4. And that one
Y-
was written by Kevin Dowling and nope, directed by Kevin Dowling and written by Eli Journet, the showrunner.
Mhm.
Um, and this one, it's got flashbacks, and it's got Steve Ogg,
Which
which
is kind of awesome
that
to see
was
him again.
crazy. That was crazy. And like some sort of 2 rooms and a hallway of the sanctuary,
Right, right.
which
But
which
what
you
are
could
you
just
gonna
go to like a mini storage and basically get those shots, I guess. So you don't have to
right,
worry too
right.
much.
So this is a flashback with Negan sort of seeing what Negan had been describing before with the Croat, and how he had tortured this young girl, and that's sort of like the bridge too far.
Well, it's curious in this scene because Negan doesn't really react in the flashback. He's thinking about it still. um Simon is the one going, "You are out of line. We don't do kids," and da da da. And Negan's just kind of standing there looking at everything. And then the flashback ends, and he's just kind of staring off into space. And Maggie is trying to read his facial expression. But I
Well,
thought that
because-
that was quite interesting. Like that was a choice that they made to be like, he's not in the moment or in the flashback. He's not protesting. He's not shooting the guy's ear off. Although we think that is the event that leads to the ear shooting.
right.
You just don't see it.
He does react a little bit with his face, but you're right. Like he's not the one vocally, like chastising the Croat. And again, I'll go back to what we have talked about before, which is that Negan has been very capable of doing horrific things, and we have seen him do horrific things. We saw him do it to Glenn, and in fact, we see it another flashback to that moment again with Maggie, and uh, so there is definitely this tension, and also we just watched him kill one of these people, and that seems really kind of that whole thing we'll have to talk about. I'm really bothered by it. Just everything about it.
Oh,
But
the Luther death still?
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it's like not only did he do it, but he kept a thing from him, which I just don't buy it.
that was stupid. Yeah, that was something that he in front of other people asked
Commented
the guy
on,
for. Yeah,
and
that
not
was
just that, but something that was clearly the guy's. Like, I just don't buy that Negan's that dumb. So anyway, so we have him here and we see a little bit of the Croat. We see a little bit of the Croat sort of insane, like, zealotism, I guess, in trying to like get, and we also learned that this person was supposedly sent by the king, from the kingdom. And so that's another thing. And this is a young girl, like probably like a teenager or something like that, and she's been, tortured to death. And so it was really cool to see Simon in these scenes. I think, he wasn't in a ton of that, like it was just a very little minimal
yeah.
appearance, but you could tell how much fun he uh uh and Negan were having in this. It was like a fun little interaction. And Richard Dean Morgan was like,
Richard Dean Morgan now.
no, no, sorry, am I like
Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan, sorry.
Richard Dean
I don't
Anderson
know
is
where.
MacGyver.
Yeah, I guess I'm messing up my heroes here or my anti-heroes. Anyway, Jeffrey D. Morgan was saying like commenting how great it was to see him. And so I think that that was like really fun to bring him back.
Oh,
And
did they have clips of that in the after show? I didn't watch either of the after
he
shows.
commented on it like in a couple of places. That was like not a huge, like, it was just like, oh, so great to see whatever, and
Steve.
Steve again. And so anyway, and they always seem to have a good time working together before. So I think that's probably a lot of fun to do that kind of a callback.
Just
Um,
happy to see Simon back
I
chewing
know,
scenery
but
because he does it so well.
and the Croat in the scene looks a little decrepit, even more
Yeah,
decrepit,
he's
and
tiny. He's like a tiny person. I mean, it doesn't hurt that Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Steve Ogg are both quite tall, and Steve Ogg is still working out like a madman. He's
he
just
looks like
he
crazy.
looks he looks huge. And by comparison, I forget the actor's name who plays the Croat. Croat is like Vladik something something.
Yeah, he always plays this kind of a
No,
character, though.
Zelko Ivanek, and he looks completely tiny. His body language though is also like a little bit um crony, and this is foreshadowing because in the second episode that we watched for today, we see more of that sort of body language. But what we're used to in New York so far in the show is him as the boss, kind of strutting and laughing and ordering people around. But I thought it was quite interesting, and I do think it was foreshadowing in this flashback to have him be like scuttling around like a little torturous crab man. Anyway, I thought that was quite interesting, even though it was a fairly short flashback. And when he is brought back to the present, they're all like, "Where's Luther?"
Um,
And nobody knows where Luther is. But they're bringing up some ideas. Where would he have gone? Well, he's a free man; he can go wherever he wants. And Negan is like, "Well, he didn't like the plan."
yeah, it's a little, and Maggie keeps looking at Negan like, "What is up?" And but she's also hiding her own thing because she had
What
been.
is going on with that? I mean, again, the second episode that we watched for this, there were a few things that happened in that I did not at all see coming, and I was like, "Holy wow!" So yeah,
Yep.
some of the question marks we've had about her behavior toward Negan and her behavior in general in this show kind of is getting answered. Not really, but we I think we have more reason to have been confused about how things were going earlier. So but yeah, we can get to there. But yeah, you're right, Maggie is just looking at Negan and trying to read him in a lot of these early scenes. And another thing starts popping up in this episode, and maybe nothing is going to come of it, but people like misplacing stuff or saying, "I thought I
Uh,
had, where are my matches? Where's," and then in the next episode, she's like, "I thought I had another flashlight." I'm like, is this going to be a theme?
yeah,
What's going on? I mean, his matches show up almost immediately.
and we know that she has them. So
Apparently, she'd had them to not burn that doll the night before.
yeah,
So they kind of like, oh, they're like, I guess Luther's not coming, no big deal. And their little group of doomed idiots, I'm sorry, the New Yorkers to be this dumb continues as a theme from the last episode where they were like, why are we doing this suicide mission for your child? Okay, here we
yeah.
go.
It also just seems, again, this just seems like an ill-fated and a stupidly planned plan.
They've
Um,
survived for 15 years in the
like why
apocalypse.
would they do a frontal assault on this massive no, but I mean, like, it's Madison Square Garden, for the love of God. Like, it's not exactly easy to get in and out of there, even when they're super secret little tunnels. I have to say, their scenes of Penn Station don't look all that different from what it looks like today. So, I guess the apocalypse just didn't do much to it. No, just kidding. But
Well,
you
there were fewer Jamba Juices
yes,
in the show.
but like the whole idea that this group of people who have been kind of scraping along, their numbers are dwindling. They're now, it seems like they're at like 5 or 6 people, right?
There's maybe 8 to 10, but they don't show them all get killed. But I mean, if we were to believe it by the death scenes, there's only like, yeah, 6 of them. But I think it was like 10 in some of the scenes where they're all walking toward Penn Station.
Yeah, so
But
it
they're not like scared. Like, remember when Maggie showed up with all those hero style characters in season 11? But they all got killed by the Reapers. This is not those guys. These are all like, yeah, I'm an accountant, but on the weekends I cosplay Walking Dead survivors. I don't know. It didn't. Yeah, they definitely felt like the B team for
Yeah.
sure. Not
Yeah.
even the B team. Like the
And gosh,
split.
even as the episode progresses, that just continues. Like you don't even really you just see this pile of walkers over people. Don't even really see any kind of, real fighting.
No, it's
But
not impressive. In Penn Station, they kind of go into these ticket booths, which they're being used as prisons or
yeah,
jail
little
cells or something.
torture chambers, yeah.
I thought
And
was kind of an interesting idea to showcase ticket booths as that. Although why every ticket booth would have its own door, I guess, seems a little bit
yeah, that seems a little
extra.
weird. But anyway, and there's this moment where Maggie thinks that she's found Herschel, and it turns out not to be
Just
him.
another kid,
Another
another
kid.
another dead child.
Yeah.
The show is not exactly like light and fluffy,
Nope.
but that's and Negan's there. He's trying to help. He says something like, "Don't you worry, Maggie. We're gonna find your boy." Even though we know as an audience he just did something kind of horrible, and she is in that moment. I thought this was like an interesting moment, right? Like she's like, oh, "I have to tell you something, Negan," and then she finds the beeswax, and she's like, "Ah, forget it. I'm not going to tell you that your adopted daughter is here in New York."
Yeah, which again, I don't really buy again. Like all this stuff about Maggie, like say what you want. I just don't think she would have kept that from him.
We just don't know what her motivations are anymore
Yeah.
because of what happens in the next episode.
Yep.
All of her motive, I mean, her motivation is to get Herschel. I don't think that that's untrue, but everything else, like her leadership, her why she went for Negan, does she even still have a beef against him? I'm not
Well,
sure. I don't know what to believe anymore.
I guess, and again, this is what I'm taking issue with just in terms of the storytelling. Everything we know about Maggie and everything we like, she definitely has made bad decisions. We've seen this, we've seen them do certain things with her. This is one of those things where I absolutely do not believe anything about this in terms of how she would go about this whole thing.
But the
Um,
thing is, HA, the problem here is they've introduced a massive time jump for this show, this spinoff.
they
Negan
have.
Negan talked about like years ago he was with Ginny, and years before that he was with his daughter and his wife, daughter or son, their child and his wife before he put them on like a wagon train to Minnesota or whatever. Like years and years and years have passed. And last time we had a massive time jump, you had all this we had a lot more show going on to talk about what happened in the time jump and why people were traumatized and why they had changed. Like didn't Michonne was
Mhm.
suddenly not welcoming the Hilltoppers or whatever it was, like those all those beefs. This amount of time jump, Maggie's character could have fundamentally changed. Like that has to be part of our calculus here too.
Okay, I think her maybe certain things about that, sure, maybe that could have happened, but I also think that Maggie isn't stupid. And she does know all she needs to know about Negan and all she needs to know about getting Herschel. And as we'll talk about like the different things that are revealed, um, I think that like she would have gone about this in a different way. Because while she, has a certain goal here, she also knows what Negan's capable of, and she does know what motivates him. And she also knows that he owes her one, and he does, a big one. And so, like, I just think you could say like him even going with her for this is sort of helping with that, but or trying to pay that back. But I feel like she would have had a moment that she would have come clean and they would have had a plan
Mm.
because this seems artificial to me, and it also seems like it changes her chances of getting her kid. So, again, so we'll talk about that as we get into this episode, but let's kind of finish up talking about this wonderfully horribly planned assault upon the Madison Square Garden arena.
There's
uh,
another, yeah, there's another scene that happens after the not telling Negan about Ginny between the Croat and a androgynous child,
mhm.
where he's like, "Don't worry, you're great. You don't have to be scared of me. Do you know how to work this DVD player?" Uh, it's I'm not sure what the purpose of that scene was now.
It's really weird. I mean, we've seen him. Well, I think it was just sort of, like he just says what he needs to say. We've seen him kill followers just for serving him rotten meat. And in this case, there's like an icky feeling about how he deals with children. We always and gives like this kid a candy, and it was just like a kind of strange. I agree with you. I feel like more is going to come out, but this served some purpose, I guess, to show that there was this whole plan in place. Because the kid basically starts the music, which is starts off the walkers all coming into the arena to get the rebels and Maggie. So
The kid starts the music. Everybody, all the Barazzi and everybody else gets out of Madison Square Garden. We never see the kid again.
hmm but not yeah.
So maybe the kid is still there, but they were never shown again. So there's no way of knowing exactly what happened. Um, yeah, it was an interesting scene. I felt like there was some identity stuff going on in it too, but yeah, it was mostly just creepy because it's the Croat and we know that he kills children, so of course that child should be concerned about being close to him.
Yep.
Maggie is like, now the plan is in place. They've come up with like a new plan on with chalk and some paper. I was like, wasn't this the original plan? What, we're coming up with a new plan. And so now they've split up. This is the part where Maggie's getting wheels, Negan's luring the Croat, and the New Yorkers are just walking to their deaths because they're idiots.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how it goes, except that Maggie does not get a vehicle. She instead runs into Ginny, who's been shadowing them, and then spends the rest of her time there, like just chasing Ginny and trying to convince her that she's not, that she has her best interests at heart, which is
And
not.
then they all walk right into
Yeah, except
the
Negan,
arena.
not with Negan, but yeah, they meet up with the New Yorkers in the arena, and the New Yorkers are like, nobody's here. I'm like, oh my god, it's such it's so clearly a trap, you guys.
Right. And like, why would you walk into the middle of a room with no cover? Like, that just doesn't make any sense. And then, and then obviously hilarity ensues where the walkers all come in and they're like forced to fight for their lives and against all odds. And I mean, there's just it just felt incredibly stupid to me.
It was so dumb
Uh,
that they didn't just immediately go into the cage.
right. Like, because that was obviously like, I mean, again, they didn't want to get trapped, I guess, but like,
They
so
already
many of
like,
them died without even, it didn't even seem like a fight, really.
yeah,
Like, just kind of waited for the walkers to come.
yeah.
Um, and so that was like ridiculous. And then Maggie sees for whatever reason this way out, but then sees Ginny in the cage and like goes back for her, and that's how they end up in the middle of the cage. um
Maggie in this series of shots during this scene, it feels like she's really callously just getting people killed.
yeah.
Even the bag lady who'd shown up last episode and seemed to be sort of
Yeah.
a hero character, I think she only showed up and became sort of a hero character to die here. Clearly, that's all she was there for. They make these little shield of pads. It doesn't really work very well, and people are still, there's only 4 of them left at that point anyway. And then Tommaso shows up out of nowhere, who last time we saw him was covered in zombies, like 8
Mhm.
zombies, and not a bite on him.
Nope.
That is more confusing to me than the fact that he eventually ends up being a traitor.
And yet other people get secret bites in weird parts of their bodies, no matter
Yeah,
what.
and actually, we don't know that he's a traitor during this episode either. So,
No, we
spoiler
don't.
alert, but we're getting there in the next episode. It was fairly obvious that one of them was going to be a traitor, I guess, because of
Yeah.
how the Barazzi always seem to be a couple steps ahead of them.
Yeah.
Although it does raise the question of like, why were they torturing a New Yorker at the beginning of the season if they
Yeah.
already had a guy who could give them all the intel?
Who had been giving them all the intel. So that's
Yeah,
kind of weird, right?
so there's a little bit of an odd one there, unless they wanted 2 traitors. Um, so yeah, the New Yorkers basically all die except for Amaya and Tommaso in this scene, and then they eventually in this scene they manage to go into the sewer, and meanwhile Negan and the Croat have been playing cat and mouse. Um, and the Croat kind of is onto them because Negan was whistling for him. That was what sort of lured him.
Mm-hmm.
The most surprising thing about all of these interactions, where they eventually do have a face to face, is how happy the Croat is to see Negan. And I feel like the show certainly had not been setting us up to expect that. So I kind of thought that was interesting. How did you like those scenes?
No, I thought that that was fine. I mean, I guess, with him, he seems so unstable that like you could see him faking the joy.
You
Like, oh,
could.
I'm so joyful. I'm so excited to see you, but I'm going to torture the crap out of you. So you could totally see that happening, and that's kind of what I thought they were doing until a little later. And then they also have the marshal there, um, and Negan's sort of forced rescue of him, which surprises the Croat. And he's in pretty bad shape because the Croat takes like a chunk out of his leg with
It's
that
that
fishing thing.
those
Uh,
terrible props, but they have like a very effective nail gun.
right.
Yeah, and Croat also name drops someone called Jerome, who was apparently a savior, who told him all about the Savior War and how it all went for Negan. So he has a fair amount of intel. I don't remember a character named Jerome. Do you?
I don't either, but it's all good. Fine. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. And so anyway, Negan and Pearlie go running, and Pearlie immediately turns on Negan. And again, I think this is just stupid.
Well,
I don't think that Pearlie would do this. I just think, you know, especially since he knows why they're there, he knows that Negan and Maggie are there to rescue Herschel. And then once he gets information about why Negan did what he did, it just feels ridiculous. And also they're still kind of fighting against all these walkers and fighting against the odds and like trying to survive, and he's still focused on like bringing Negan in. It just seems just ridiculous to me.
it
um
is kind of, yeah, like one dimensional, but obviously now that they are in the trope
yeah.
of the like the bounty hunter and the bounty person, that trope is happening. They're building that relationship, and now we can build up from you're coming with me, and you're a dick to we both work for the state. I was a gym teacher, and you were like a garbage raft
Yeah, yeah, something like that.
guy. So I mean, I think that's happening mostly in the next episode because yeah, it basically ends with you're a dick, and then Maggie going down into the sewers. But I like I like the break it down so you can build it back up sort of plot line. Maybe in real life, Pearlie would be more grateful than citing code and chapter and verse of the criminal code to Negan right before he tries to take him in again. So, but it's still like better for the storytelling, I think, for him to kind of turn on him immediately.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess you got to have some kind of tension there.
So then we're in episode 5, the stories we tell ourselves. I don't remember either of these lines being spoken in these episodes. Everybody wins a prize was the last one, and
Oh, Amaya says that.
oh, she
Amaya says
does.
that at the beginning of the planning thing.
And stories we tell ourselves is this one, which was written by Brenna Kalf and directed by Ganja Montero. Um, this one is a lot of sewer stuff.
Hmm.
The sewer, I don't know what I was expecting. The whole like conceit of this giant sewer that you can walk in upright, just being full of zombie bodies or dead humans or whatever they are,
Decompose.
um, decomposing, filled with methane. It's amazing that they're able to breathe at all.
I don't think they would be. I think they just die.
I feel like yeah, the first person to go down the ladder would have passed out, the second person would have passed out on top of them, and so on until you had a stack of bodies at the bottom of the ladder.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I think it's a little silly, and like not as silly though as Maggie's refusal to wear an oxygen mask throughout the entire episode.
Yep. And then not take it when one becomes available. Um, so, she kind of goes through this whole thing, and then they're going through the sewers, and she ultimately accuses Tommaso of being the rat. And it turns out he is, and he's got two oxygen things, which he and Amaya have been trading off, and then they give one to Ginny. And they're going through this whole like it's sort of monotonous because they're just going through like room after room or tunnel after tunnel bodies, but it's like these big rooms that are just, or these big tunnels that just, you're not like necessarily crawling through. Fine. There's walkers sort of here and there. And then there's like the whole really big scene where she has promised Amaya that she could end up at the brick place. And then it all goes kind of south there because walkers start sort of appearing and
Yeah.
it's sort of in the piles of the bodies. And they, look, the makeup artist must have had a lot of fun with some of this because it's like the decomposing bodies, the walkers that are kind of like
Coming
fused
through
with
them.
other things coming through them, and
Yeah.
and then here, when faced with only a few of these, Tommaso suddenly bites it, and so does Amaya in a way that just seemed insane to me compared
What
to what they were just dealing with.
I think I wasn't looking at the screen when Amaya. I look up at some point and Amaya's eyes are closed and she's not moving. I'm like, did she
Yeah,
just
like
die immediately to something?
I don't
What
know. It was just
what
very
killed her?
it was very strange, like how they did this. Like I think that they had the Walker sort of, but it seemed like it was like a lot more than what they initially showed. Again, this just seemed ridiculous to me, and especially with what they had just dealt with in the arena. And then Tommaso also like weirdly succumbs really quickly, and Maggie doesn't take his oxygen mask, which is dumb. Um, and he basically told her that the reason why he gave them all up was because it wasn't useful fighting. He was going to get a boat because he implies that Amaya is pregnant or something, and that they were going to like get out of there and go to the place, which is basically describing Brick. um and so Maggie has some insight into a little bit of this, but leaves them. And by the way, the whole storyline with these like tribe people, well, Negan's never gonna get like nothing's ever gonna happen because nobody's gonna ever know that he killed that other Luther because now they're all dead. And then she and Ginny are left to kind of make their way.
Yeah.
And she says some things to Ginny, just that she needs Negan to help her with her son, that she didn't tell him about Ginny and Ginny being there because she didn't know if Ginny was dead or alive, but she might still not because she needs his help. So, and she doesn't want him to take Ginny out of the city and that kind of thing. And of course, like, there's not a lot to go here because Ginny's totally silent, right? Like,
Yeah,
there's
but she
nothing.
nods at the end of
She
the speech.
nods.
She gives her a nod. But then has like a little repartee later
Yeah,
later on after Maggie has like said, "Save yourself, I'll hold them off."
right.
I'm
And
like, I don't know why Jenny would still be so salty against Maggie when she just saved her from like a 5-in-1 zombie,
yeah,
which was pretty cool effects.
that
I
was
don't
kind of,
know, you know, like especially when those extra heads started chewing through the
yeah,
torso.
that was pretty
Oh
funny.
boy.
Wow.
But at that point, Maggie's been wandering around in the methane tunnels for so long that she's kind of almost useless, except for the fact that her left hand by itself can hold 5 bodies uh,
Yep.
away from her.
Yep.
Because not only does she have to keep the main head away and the head next to that head, but there's 2 heads lower down. So if she gets the body anywhere close to her, she's getting bitten,
Right.
and she's wearing like a her little sexy tank top number, so she can't. She's got a lot of exposed skin and just a thin layer of cotton between her and 4 or 5 zombie mouths.
I know, I know. And then, but eventually she prevails. She just keeps hitting, like killing heads, and then they do the last sort of jump scare at the end where she hits it.
Yeah, I was like, I know that there's another one. Where is it? And then they used it for a jump scare. That they don't do a lot of jump scares in this show, so I thought that was actually. I mean, I did not jump. I was not scared,
No, I
but
mean,
it's rare for this show to engage in that level of horror tomfoolery. So I was proud of him for trying.
yeah, yeah. Then she
Yeah.
gets the tunnels and she sees this big liar written out by Ginny, and there's like all these flashbacks where the big reveal happens, and
Well, one of the big reveals for this episode, but and that's that Ginny for some reason had climbed into the grain silo and was like, "Is there grain here? Yes, there is. Why did she go in there? I don't know."
I don't know, it's kind of strange. But it's and then
But
the
the fact
reveal.
remains, the Barazzi did not steal their grain.
But
Did
we also
not. Yeah.
see the reveal with Maggie, and well, I guess that's at the end of this episode. But so we know that that's why Ginny's like. There's a lot of reasons why Ginny is not trusting Maggie, but because she mentioned that the grade had all been stolen, and that was part of her motivation. Ginny is not buying it, and nor should she.
Why
And
does
so,
she need that to be part of her motivate? Like, why does that need to be part of her backstory? Why not just say they came and stole my son?
right, because that seems like motivation enough to just come and get him. I
Because
don't know.
when she's giving her speech, she's like, not only did they come and take my our all of our food, so we're gonna like my community will starve. Worse than that, they took this child, my child. I'm like, is it worse that he was taken, or is it worse that like 40 or 50 people will starve to death? I don't know, Maggie.
Right. And so I think she had to make it be a bigger thing too, because she's basically still trying to convince Ginny that she's not going to tell Negan she's there. So I think that that was part of it too.
Yeah, it's
But anyway,
it's pretty weak sauce.
we also have the Croat going on this visit to the
Well,
Dom.
let's talk about. Wait, so you mean at the theater later?
Yeah.
That's way at the end. Let's talk about Pearlie and Negan, because they do have their buddy, their relationship building. They go to a school bus where Negan wraps him up. I guess there isn't a whole lot to this plot, but
Not
it's the A
really.
and B. And like Pearlie is limping quite badly, but they stay together pretty well until Negan is basically his prisoner. They go into this weird building where I was like, this could go really bad. Like the doll stuff, it's looking sketchy, it's looking bad. But then they find a guy who's or a person who has figured out a way to axe himself in the face ingeniously, I would say. And after some conversation with Pearlie, Negan decides, you know what, this isn't working for me. I need to go take care of my business. I don't have time to be his prisoner, and tries to get away from him. But then feels bad that Pearlie's not in great shape and is like, you know what? I'm not going to leave you to die. I thought this was good. This was good. Even more of this like Negan character building, where in this show we've been, is he old Negan? Is he new Negan? This is definitely not old Negan stuff that he's doing.
And he keeps saying things like, "You don't know who I am." And he says this to everybody. So there's that. And then I guess we go to the hotel where Croat's there trying to hide his ear
I
under this
thought this
hat.
was a flashback, like suddenly
No,
he drives up in a Barazzi car. So I guess you could think it's recent-ish. And then he puts a hat on to hide his ear and goes into this theater where all these people. And I'm like, who are all these people? They don't necessarily look like Barazzi, but maybe they are. I thought I was kind of confused by a lot of this scene.
yeah. So there's this whole little enclave, I guess, of Negan-esque type people or Croat type people, and they keep talking about, how there's always the people who want things to go back the way it was, and you have to protect from them. And there's this whole sort of plot that they need Negan to lead them, or that's what it seems like they're saying. The really weird woman, the Dama, who he's coming to see, clearly like keeps talking about stage references and about heroes, and she's chastising the Croat. So it's like the kind of first indication that the Croat isn't running the show, which is the assumption, which he is a minion here, definitely. And he has been kind of failing in his mission. So
Yeah,
that's
this is the where the foreshadowing from the previous episode definitely comes back, and now again he's bowing and scraping and talking about how he succeeded in extracting information and the problem was taken care of, but he'd also screwed up and not delivered Negan, and so he's getting chastised by this. I don't know, like a old starlet maybe, like admiring herself in her mirror with the light bulbs around it's kind of a funny thing where if the New Yorkers who all just got killed were, thought they were like the last survivors or the dominant survivor group on Manhattan, they didn't know about this like Broadway niche
right.
of
Apparently, this Broadway niche of villains happening.
it's pretty silly, but there they are being evil, and it's I'm not sure how they're going to make this woman feel like a real leader. The woman who comes out of her dressing room right before the Croat goes in, and she's like, "Get out of my way," and he's like, who we're talking to them now. So I feel like they're trying to like, first of all, they did successfully throw me a curveball with the scene. I'm like, what? He's
Yeah,
not in charge. But then there's like possibly multiple factions here.
right.
So
So
setting us up for this third act, which is the last episode of the season. Although
right.
I guess
And
maybe,
then
yeah.
Yeah, and then they reveal even more with Maggie's flashback, which is basically that she was given no instructions, just given the wanted poster by the Croat as they pulled Herschel away.
Yeah.
So no instructions. Maybe she got more, but that was all. And so she has successfully lured Negan into this and knows all this. And so I go back to what I was wanted to say at the beginning of this episode, which is that Maggie knows Negan well enough. She knows that he owes her one. She knows that her best chance of getting Herschel isn't just to give him up to this crazy dude that's been raiding them. It would be to come clean to Negan and tell him what was going on and have them go in with eyes open. And regardless of what might have happened to her over the years, I do think Maggie, especially because she wants so much to have her son survive, and that's her one reason for existence. I just don't think that she would mess it up this way. And
Hmm.
I think even some of the ways they have her acting here are unlike her. Um, and, certainly she could always have that animosity with Negan, and I think we saw that at the end of the OG series, where she was just like, okay, it's not going to be okay, but we're not gonna like be at odds at this point. We're just kind of letting it go. I'm gonna let it go because I have to move forward. And I just don't believe that she wouldn't know. I mean, we saw her ally with him for specific reasons, and usually they had to do with her kid. And she knows, like, I mean, Negan saved Herschel, protected him
Hmm.
in that kind of last siege, in the last, like, she knows all of that. And she also knows that Negan isn't going to just let Herschel sit out there. So all of this subterfuge to me seems like BS, but I guess they had to come up with something to do a show. I am curious about what this faction is. I think that's the most interesting thing that's happened. And I am really like, I just feel like this whole tribe of New Yorkers thing was sort of a throwaway. Like,
Yeah.
why even bother with all these characters? Like, make it good, make it like actually feasible that they could fight the Croat, or that they would be smart enough not to fight the Croat, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I'm fine with them introducing this tribe of New Yorkers and then being like them saying, "Hell no, we're not going to help you, but here's a
Right,
map. You can use this map, and maybe
right.
Tommaso can show you where they are because they want
Sure.
that would have made sense in the story too for Tommaso to volunteer in quotes to take
Right,
them to,
and then give them up or something, because that was, and rather than betray his whole group of people,
but for
like,
them all to just walk into there and all to just die so easily did feel like a waste of a faction.
yeah,
And it feels like something that Fear the Walking Dead has done too many times too, where they introduce people and either just forget about them or just get them all killed right away,
yep.
which is silly. Um, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like, why not just tell them what's going on? In her defense, she did try to go to New York by herself first, right? That was the first scene of
Yeah,
this
I guess so.
show. She tried to do it alone. She saw the water and started to cry. So maybe she's, she was like, I gotta go get Negan anyway. But then she has been doing this without telling him why. And Ginny's onto her, and she's gonna have a lot of splaining to do. But at the end of this episode, she's out in the streets. She pulls up a flare pistol, shoots it up into the sky. Negan sees it. Maggie sees it. We can assume everybody else in New York is seeing it. And I'm sure shenanigans will ensue when they get back together for the final episode of the season. And she's gonna have to come clean or something.
I know, and maybe we can have Ginny actually talk, because that has actually been kind of a ridiculous
Annoying.
thing in this whole thing. Like, let's actually have this character, I don't know, like interacting with people. So I don't know. We shall see what happens in the final episode, and I mean, knowing that it's been renewed, I guess they have somewhere to go with it. So we
Yep,
shall see. They have a lot to
exactly.
wrap up with this new faction that they just introduced, though. So
Well, they could just be introducing another big bad for next season. It's still
yeah,
called Dead City, which
true.
makes us think that they're not going to get out of New
Not
York,
getting out of the city, I guess.
not getting out of New York in the final episode, or they're going to go to another city. Maybe the next one will be in New Haven.
Yeah, the other thing I was wondering though, and they still haven't fully, I did notice that the walkers in certain places were like running, which does not normally happen. So
Oh, yeah, there
I
was some
didn't know,
lurching
and
anyway.
I didn't know if they were going to introduce like the smart walkers into this that we saw.
I was expecting them to have smart or fancy walkers in every spinoff now, since it was such a big
Yeah.
thing at the end of the last season.
Yeah, so maybe they're saving that for Daryl's show. I don't know. But in any case, we shall see what the last episode beholds. But I'm looking forward to watching it and seeing what they come up with.
Absolutely. So if you want to get at us, you can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. Our shows are online at reanimated.podbean.com. And yeah, give us a holler and join us again next time when we finish up the first season of Dead City. Looking forward to it. Um, so I will say toodaloo.
Ciao. See you next time. Thanks for listening.